All right, hey guys. Today we're talking about the rise of the Franks. So the Franks are, first of all, one of the Germanic tribes that was attacking Rome. So a little background information on like why Rome fell. So we know that it was inflation, invasion, bad leadership, natural disasters. Well, one of the main reasons was invasion. So Germanic tribes from Northern Europe kept coming into Rome and attacking them. So Rome eventually will fall, and it's going to be replaced by these tiny little kingdoms that we'll be talking about throughout this chapter. There was no real infrastructure when it came to these little kingdoms. They were always warring with each other. There was no like system for building roads, collecting taxes, education, things like that. That wasn't really something they were concerned about because they were always getting attacked. And as we've talked about, like if you're worried about getting murdered, you're not worried about, learning to read. So people's priorities were definitely shifted in this time in history as they were in Roman times. So if you look up here on the screen, you can see these are some of the major kingdoms. Um, this is like right around when Justinian would have ruled, which is, he was a Byzantine emperor. So we can see the Byzantine Empire here on the screen. But then we can see how divided it is here in Europe. Right, so the Franks were one of those larger groups, one of the Germanic tribes, and they're going to control territory in modern day France and Germany. So Clovis was kind of the first Frankish king to really build it up. And he is going to bring Christianity to the area, and he defeats like the last little piece of the Roman army. So Clovis really starts the Franks off into becoming a stronger society. So he, in 732, this is going to be done by, the guy's name is really interesting. His name is Charles the Hammer. He defeats the Umayyad dynasty at the Battle of Tours. Now, this is a very significant battle in the history of the world because the Umayyad dynasty had taken over Spain. Well, essentially, Charles the Hammer stopped the Muslim expansion into the rest of Europe. And take a second and imagine how different the world we live in would be if Europe had become an Islamic society. So this is a very significant battle in the culture of the world. So in 768, Charlemagne becomes king of the Franks. He's grandson of Charles the Hammer. And Charlemagne is considered one of the greatest rulers to have ever lived. We'll talk about him in more detail. In 800, Pope Leo III is going to crown Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor. And this has a lot of significance that we'll talk about for the next several days. In 814, Charlemagne dies, and his empire is going to be divided up into 3 pieces. And spoiler alert, that's not a good idea. It's going to cause a decline in the empire because now they're going to be kind of fighting with each other rather than working together. So if you need to write that down, you can pause the video. I'd really love it if you would try to answer this in your notes. All right, so Charlemagne. He becomes king of the Franks in 768, and he expands his empire through military conquests. He was a very good military leader. He gets named Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III. This is a really interesting story. So essentially, Pope Leo is in Rome. And the people in Rome didn't like Pope Leo because he wasn't from the nobility. So they didn't think he should be Pope. So they were attacking Pope Leo, and he knew that Charlemagne was a very devout Christian, like that he would come to his defense. So he asked Charlemagne to protect him, and Charlemagne did. And as a reward, he named Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor. But in the process, Charlemagne is kneeling before the Pope. So in that situation, the Pope is putting the crown on Charlemagne's head. Who has more power? The person crowning the emperor or the person kneeling? So it was kind of the Pope was very smart to do this because now he's made himself above the emperor. He would give his nobles land in exchange for military service, and this basically creates feudalism in Europe. So Charlemagne is hugely important to European history because he creates a system that's going to continue for about 1,000 years. Okay, so he's going to reunite a lot of territory that has not been reunited since, Roman times. I would say in about 400 years it hasn't been reunited. Um, and this is again because he has people that are loyal to him because he's given them land as part of that feudalism system. Um, so he would break his territory up into pieces, like I was telling you, which is smart because one person can't rule an entire kingdom. So he would break it up into counties, and the people that ruled the counties were counts. That's where we get that phrase, counts. However, he was distrustful of his counts. So he actually had like secret spies that would go and make sure that they were doing their job correctly. So, yes, he kind of starts feudalism, but he's more powerful than the feudal kings that follow him because he creates this system, but once it continues, the counts start becoming more powerful. Not really more powerful, more independent than the emperor. A good way to think of like feudalism and like how the emperor king isn't an absolute ruler, like think about it like at school. Like when you're in the classroom, the person that you're listening to is the teacher. But there's also the principal that's in charge, right? But when you're in the classroom, you're not thinking, oh, I need to be listening to what the principal's saying. You're thinking about, oh, I need to be listening to the person who's right in front of me, what they're saying. So I hope that kind of explains how feudalism works a little bit better. So some of the main achievements about Charlemagne, he was really big into bringing literacy to his kingdom. He actually was illiterate for a lot of his life, and he was super embarrassed about it. And he had really horrible handwriting, and he would practice writing, and he would keep it a secret because he didn't want anybody to know, and he was ashamed of his lack of education. But kind of the only people at this time that were educating people was the church. So he really wanted to bring more Catholic churches to his kingdom so people could be educated. Um, he also wanted people to convert to Christianity. He would say conversion by the sword, meaning as he conquered, he wanted them to convert to Christianity. And of course, this is why Pope Leo turned to him, because he clearly is doing things to spread Christianity throughout Europe. So after Charlemagne's death, his kingdom is going to be divided into these three pieces that you can see here. This is done in a treaty in 843. They do fine for a while, but eventually they're just going to become weaker and weaker and become more feudalistic, meaning the king loses power, the lords continue to gain power. And that's all for today, guys. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know.